You are now listening to Talk Your Jits podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talk Your Jits podcast. This podcast is, as the name implies, all about Jiu Jitsu. I am your host, Lamar Smith, and today's guest is a 4th degree black belt who trains at North Valley Aikikai, located in Northridge, California. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Louie Cercedez.
Great pronunciation. Good job.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you.
Welcome. Well, thank you to be, part of this. This is a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Let's talk about some jiu-jitsu. Whatever you want to know, whatever you think I can either, speak on or clarify or lie about.
But yeah,
or whatever.
Right.
It's great.
But most definitely. But you can go ahead and start. Just kind of give us like a your training history, when you started and everything else, and we can just ride from there.
Sure. I got a kind of interesting little story. I've done martial arts my whole life, right?
Mm-hmm.
My dad's a black belt, and I grew up literally doing it, like going to the dojo every couple of nights, you know what I mean, throughout the week, my entire existence, until I got old enough to be stuck in a class.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a very interesting experience, specifically when I was like 7, right? So I'm there and I'm watching this guy come in the door, and he talks with our instructor, and they do like this little side kind of demonstration, was the best way to put it. And they started like, let me show you what I do when you this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was on the ground. And it was amazing. And the guy says, and I'll never forget this, that guy says, we have techniques. If you are on your back in the sand with a guy on top of you, you can still win. Mind you, 7 years old, right?
Right.
I heard this. I'm like 2 feet away from this because I was like near the little like crash pads that they were sort of using to roll around on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, how is that possible? Like, I had already been in fights by that age. Like, I got older cousins. I remember being like pinned to the ground and things like that. And I'm like, how is that even a thing, right? And I'm used to the karate that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we got this soul like punch and kick style. It's pretty effective. But then there's some times where I'm like, I just don't think that's going to work, right?
Right.
Mind you, 7. So I see this demonstration and they go back and forth. And this guy really significantly manhandles my coach, but not in a necessarily like mean way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was just nothing he could do. He flopped and thrashed and twisted, and this guy was perfectly in position and finished him or something. They stopped each time, and they were like a surprise and like, wow, what was that sort of a thing, right?
Right.
So that stuck with me my whole life. And I remember that day specifically, and it kind of went away because we never really touched on that again too much as I continued to train with the same group of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we went, as I got older, to teenager and seeing them fight and seeing them win championships and seeing all these things. And I did the same thing that they did. And that was just like a tiny little instant pin drop of what I heard, because I remember this guy talking, and he had long hair and a big mustache and dark skin, and he talked with an accent. And I, again, being 7, thought he was from the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said the word jiu-jitsu, right? But he also pronounced it differently. He said jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu.
Very specifically, right?
Yep.
So I remember there was a kid in school who had a flyer, and I remember reading in elementary school, jiu-jitsu, and I went, wow, if that's what that guy does, and hearing what he did, I don't ever want to like mess with this kid. I remember that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, he just had a flyer like, hey, I'm going to go here, or I'm just going to start going there. And I thought, like, okay, that was cool. But I remember how effective it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was completely, entirely effective. And it seemed like you just broke arms and finished this guy, right? No matter what. So flash forward, I continue training and continue doing the styles that I'm doing: boxing, kickboxing, karate, right? Boxing, kickboxing, karate with Muay Thai, but like the Dutch style mixed into this, because of the place I came from was a not quite a mecca, but yeah, a mecca and a gathering point for some significant people that did kickboxing and Thai boxing from around the world. They came here to Los Angeles and they trained with us at this place.
Okay.
So I go in the Navy, right? I'm 17. I continue to kind of train a little bit, and I couldn't find a martial arts place anywhere. And finally, I found one. And my dad was always on me about, we should learn wrestling. We should learn how to, do some wrestling, some kind of thing like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was kind of cool. And he would always be on me. He came to visit me in San Diego, and he broke out the phone book and was like, see, here's a place, right? Because just how he was with martial arts. So, I'm there and I meet this guy by chance at a movie premiere, and they're doing a martial arts demonstration, and he taught a class, and it was local, and I ended up started going to that class, and it was a class for guys who were either in law enforcement or teaching in some fashion of martial arts. And it was a class that covered Jiu Jitsu movements. And I thought that was incredible, right? So there was this older guy, and he was in his 50s and at the time, and he wasn't really in good shape, but he had about 150 classes under his belt, right? He came religiously once a week for however many years and however many classes. This guy just came, and he didn't, wasn't in any kind of shape, but he got into a situation where this party got out of control. He ended up sort of fighting a guy and was able to hold him inside of what we called the guard and keep himself at least safe until other cops got there to sort of help him. But it was a big, huge deal, right? And the very next week, he had my friend who owned the school, a gentleman, show up. And that guy was the guy that taught my friend. And he was a guy by the name of Roy Harris in San Diego. Okay. And he covered a few movements on the ground. And I said, oh my God, this is what I saw when I was a kid. This is that stuff, right? This is now like around November of like 93. Right. But I had been training since around September with my friend. And we just covered these movements, but we didn't necessarily call them anything. Right. He was part of the course that he was teaching. It was just ground fighting is what he had said. Right. Right. But he had been taking privates from Roy. And Roy was a student at the police academy at the time, or had just graduated, or something along those timelines. So that's how my friend met him. And that moment I went, wow, I fully understand what's happening here. Like, I can learn this stuff. Like, this is simple, and this is effective, and this is what I saw. Well, lo and behold, do you know who it was that I saw and who it was that was there in 1970 doing a demonstration with my instructor?
I think I have a general idea.
None other than Horry and Gracie.
Yeah. Wow.
So, flash forward, 1993, I'm like, this is it. Where are you, and how do I get there? Right. So, I'm in the Navy, and I find this class once a week, right? My command changes, and I go to a ship, and I'm on a ship with a mixed group of people. We also deploy a contingent of Marines, and we have a platoon of SEALs, and we have a platoon of Force Recon guys. And there's about 1,500 people on the ship total, ship's crew, and broken up between other people and other stuff. And one day, we're at sea, and we're on our way to Hawaii, and the SEALs are working out down below in this area, and they got a bunch of mattresses strewn out, and I'll be damned if those dudes aren't doing jujitsu. Nice. And I was like, oh my God. So I like kind of creep over around the edge, and I'm like, hey, guys, I'm kind of, I'm about to get off work in half hour, if you guys are still going to be here, can I, like maybe come down and maybe do some of this stuff with you? You know what I mean? Like I trained a little bit before, and they're like, yeah, man, it's cool, whatever. Like one more dude to beat the shit out of, right? It's going to be fine, right? So I change and I run down there, and they were just finishing up, but I was able to roll with one of their guys. And he beat the crap out of me, but I was still able to like actually do jujitsu back with him for a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Mind you, still new. Enough to where the other guys were like, hey man, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like, if we down here again, you can come down here too. You know what I mean? Like, it's cool. And then only a couple of them were like really into martial arts. So at the end, we kind of break up, and one guy goes over and starts lifting weights, and I happened to just be talking to him, and I was like, hey man, when we get back, if you want, we can go up to LA and I'll call my dad. And, I mentioned this place, and I told him, we can go do some training with some guys and, have some lessons and whatever. And they were kind of like, what? And I was like, yeah. So when we get back, I can call my dad and he can arrange like basically privates with some serious champion dudes. You know what I mean? For nothing, because they're my friends. You know what I mean? And they're like, really? Holy shit. Like right on, so a couple of them right after that were like, hey man, you want to go shooting with us? And I was like, well, yes, that sounds great. So on that deployment, we developed this friendship, and a few of them we trained every single day.
I love it.
Then we got back to San Diego, and they were like, well, who did you learn from? And I was like, I know this guy down in Pacific Beach, Roy Harris, and whatever. And I took my friend, and my friend was like, man, I better not be able to kick his ass. If this guy's for real, he's going to beat the crap out of me, right? And I was like, don't worry, it'll be fine. I really think it'll be cool. Like, because back in the day, most of the time, and this is a problem with current, like, World's Jiu-Jitsu and also with beginners, is that people are like, let me see if this stuff works, right? And the next thing you know, it's like Crunch City. And it's a mess. And then my arm doesn't work for a while, you know what I mean? And then I can't train, or that guy beat up the other guy in class that's coming and paying. And now, you know what I mean? Just because you wanted to tap him all crazy and he didn't even know what that was, and he's like, let me resist a little bit. Now my guy can't pay anymore, you know what I mean? So my friend's like, I better not be able to kick his ass. And I was like, dude, I really think it's going to be cool, right? Just trust me, Alice. He's like, all right. And this guy's a black belt. I'm like, I don't know. He didn't say it was a black belt, but still, I don't really know. But he's really good, man. He trained with a lot of people. So I take him down there, and we go and we start taking like official lessons, like once a week on Sundays. And from Roy himself. And Roy was able to be perfect. He was like a college professor, mentality, totally broke everything down like a scientist, really put out some good information. And, we had a good amount of time to train. These were like 2.5, 3 hour classes. And so fast forward to the following, few months later, and we actually deploy. And back then it was like a information vacuum, right? This internet generation, and everybody gets to see any movement they want or some shit. If you wanted to learn something, your ass needed to come to class back then.
Right.
That's how it was. It needed to come to class. And also, that stuff wasn't taught. There was like, okay, everybody, let's do 50 push-ups, 50 jumping jacks, 50 crunches. Okay, one person on their back, one person in their guard, pass the guard. Okay, then switch. Okay, but what do we do? Okay, but how do we do that?
Right.
Okay, what happens? I've been here for 3 minutes. You see what I mean?
Right.
And Roy wasn't like that. Roy taught. And that was the first thing that I noticed. See, I just went and started taking classes, and I knew that I was getting something good, but I didn't know how good. I had no idea how good. So now, flash forward, my dad and I are sharing information, and I go back to this kickboxing place, and I lay waste to a bunch of people who were like, untouchable guys, where I'm like, yeah, dude, see, you can't, like, this is everything that we know is pretty much stuff that really ain't going to help us when this stuff starts happening.
Right.
We can try all we want. You can try really hard, but it's a whole different story when the guy's on top of you, with a plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's on top of you with a plan. It's not just whatever. We can't whatever we used to before. So I go back, and now my dad and this school is kind of having a lot of like mismanagement issues. There was some issues with the building, things like that, and the school kind of dissolved. And my dad sought out the local and was recommended by that school in general. Some people went to one area of town, but it was a little bit far. And this other jiu-jitsu place, who the people that my dad got his black belt from and trained with, they recommended.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a really prominent early on school. Happened to be a few blocks from his house, so he cruises down there and he starts taking lessons. He eventually made it to blue belt with the old school way, like, all right, everybody against the wall, we're going to give out a belt tonight, like those days, back in the early 90s. So I come home on leave and I go to his school with him, and they were really nice to me, but sort of, right? It was just another person that they could kind of try their stuff on and maybe try to, I don't know whether it's impose their will or like just do jujitsu against somebody else competitively.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the family members were kind of cool. Some of them were nicer than others. And before I had went up there, I was telling my coach Roy, hey, I'm gonna go up and see my dad. I'm gonna take some leave before we deploy for good, and I'm gonna go train at this place. And he says, oh, you might not want to tell him that you train with me. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, because I used to train there and some stuff went down, and the Brazilians, and this also plays so much relevancy to today with this statement of how much things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
He says, basically tells me a story about them kicking him out. Why? Because when the Brazilians were first here, they were competing in Sambo tournaments.
Yeah.
And because they were competing, and it was the only game in town in Sambo tournaments, my coach Roy had befriended a Sambo practitioner, very high level, that went to UCSD where Roy was teaching. And he taught Roy the footlock.
Oh.
And he taught Roy the footlock on an incredibly high level because he was high level. His name was Nick Batruin, right?
Okay.
And he knew everything there is to know about the leg. And he was also very good at the judo section and the aspect of throwing. So there were some of the family members that struggled with him in those Sambo competitions. Some won and some did not win. And they truly believed that Roy was teaching them the jiu-jitsu that he was learning from them and learning the leg locks from this man as well. And they said that it's really not fair that I have to compete directly against this guy and he's learning the techniques that he wouldn't know otherwise than you were working with him in this way. So it more was a misunderstanding because it technically wasn't Roy. There was actually two other practitioners that trained with that family that were sharing the information. Roy was just training with him and necessarily learning from him the whole leg lock game.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really frowned upon to use leg locks, period. Like at all. You don't do them in your academy. 1. Number 2, I don't care, straight, bent, twisted. You don't do them. You hurt somebody, you don't get to train again for like however many months.
Oh.
Like it's a big deal. So Roy tells me that I shouldn't mention it. I said, well, I don't think that's really honest because you're the only reason that I really know jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the reason that like you taught me all of these things. So if they would ask, I would tell them. And, also prideful, but, I didn't see a reason to pretend, and I didn't think that that was really cool or whatever. I don't know what happened, but he seemed like he had done a lot for me. And I wanted him to also know that I wasn't going to pretend that I didn't learn that from him.
Right.
So he says, really? Well, he goes, why don't you stay after class? So he has me stay after class, and he says, if you're going to go there and tell him you trained with me, then you might as well know my signature. So he taught me the leg lock. A lot.
That's
Like,
awesome.
a lot. Okay, so mind you, this is 1994, and I am on leave. I come up to LA. I train at this school, and it was interesting because I went to the mixed group class with colored belts too, and the instructor specifically picked who I was to train with. All of them were like a large and experienced blue belt who had like one intention, and that was to do the jiu-jitsu that they practice, very hard, fundamentally sound, kick your ass, old school, good position jiu-jitsu.
That's the
And
best.
like,
That's the best kind of jujitsu.
yeah, they wanted to, they weren't about to not let me have it.
Right.
And I was able to like be neutral sometimes with some of the guys, and it was like okay. And then I was able to footlock a couple of the smaller guys. So they weren't exactly mean, but they weren't exactly friendly. One of the family members was very nice, said some really cool things before I left, and also told me that story. And he told me too, from his perspective, he's like, yeah, I know him. He's a nice guy. Roy Harris, he goes, it's not fair that he, was teaching Nick and I have to compete against this guy. And I was like, okay, I see that, whatever. But he didn't hold it against me or for me or anything like that. He was just nice about it. And the brown belt at the time, who went on to create a pretty big organization, the brown belt at the time was like, yeah, Hoy Harris, Hoy. It's always referred to as Hoy, H-O-Y, right? Not Roy, Hoy.
Right.
Hoy Harris, yeah, I know him. He almost broke my leg. He almost broke my leg. He passed white belt. I go with him very gently, and he take my leg. He almost break. And then I choke him 3 times, just like that. So I hear the story from Roy, and I'm like, here's what happened. He said, kind of like pauses, and he's like, yeah, sort of. He goes, he started it with like you can get out of those leg locks that you do. Watch, put me in one. So that's more. And because he says, put me in one, he, to try to prove that he can get out of it. And Roy was able to like finish it and then finish it again and then finish it. And then when he goes, normal as a brown belt, he didn't have this, he had way more skill to just outskill him and do the jiu-jitsu and not let him do any of the things that he knew, even if they're tricky moves. Right. You know what I mean? Through sound, fundamental positioning and head posture and, overall control. You don't let the guy get to the things that, you know what I mean? He's there. And as a white belt, he doesn't necessarily have the escaping or the body positioning or the things that make it so he can fend off those sorts of controls to apply one of the tricky things. You see what I mean? At that time.
At the time, right.
Right. But the whole put me in it, let me see if I can get out. And, then not being able to because of the mechanics, because of the way it's doing it. Right. Exactly. So that jiu-jitsu became, a little bit back and forth with leg locks, no leg locks. You're not allowed. Gi, no gi. What do you mean you to train without a gi? We just trained without gis because we didn't have them in this, like, what was it? An aerobic studio we were training in, right? Okay. We had mats in a closet, and we just wore shirts and t-shirts and shorts and basketball shorts or whatever. You know what I mean? It just was like that.
This was pre-fight. Like, this is fight gear, like compression shirts and rash guards and stuff.
Are you kidding me? I'm going to even go this far. I'm not even going to tell you. You can see the progression in like my old fight tapes and training tapes and videos to the point where I'm not going to say that, okay, look, I think the bow and arrow was invented in many different places, could be at the same time by people that had no contact with each other, that it's just something that's like the light turns on and it click and, oh yeah, let's do it like this. Mm-hmm. But I'm not kidding you. I was one of the first guys to train and fight with board shorts on. They were No Fear brand board shorts, and they were heavy satin. And I thought that those were the things that were going to be the ones that were going to be something to withstand the grips and them trying to manipulate your shorts. In like the 1990 flash forward to like 97, 98, that's when that kind of took effect.
Okay.
Right in that time for. I was still also a no shirt. You train jiu-jitsu with no shirt, shorts, and wrestling shoes. We wore wrestling shoes at Roy's school. Not because we were wrestlers, but because we wore wrestling shoes. It's just what we did.
Right.
Mat burn. I didn't train with knee pads for a while. And my knees would be so raw. Oh my God. My knees were so raw. Raw. Okay, they would scab over, right? And at the time, I had just got to the ship. And I lived on the top bunk. And I would rip the scabs climbing up to the top bunk. And my coveralls, the little like fuzzy parts would stick to the broken scab. And I'd have to pick the fucking broken, like dirty cotton pieces, like from the lint from inside of your pocket out of my scabs from training. That's how bad that it was.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're there with Roy. We do our training. We do the leg locks. I come to this school. I put a few guys in leg locks. I train with them for a while. I have an okay experience, and I go back. But what I notice is they taught very little. And I noticed that not only did they teach very little, the students that there were learning from each other, either during pre-class or during the rolling. And they would stop and they would watch the upper belt, or they would watch the black belt like do a this to the guy, and they would be like, oh, try that. Or, oh, hold your arm when the guy's trying to straighten it. Little tiny simple things that now we don't even consider, but that was information back then.
Okay.
There was no YouTube. Right. There was few, and I mean count them on your hand, few videotape series. So on the ship, and we deploy, me and my buddies put our money together, and we bought the 11 tape Renzo Gracie series on VHS. And we watched them every day, and we bought mats in Singapore, and we trained every day. We were training on mattresses for a while, and then it went to the puzzle mats. We bought puzzle mats. The ship helped pay for them from MWR fund. And we're like, yeah, people can use them for sit-ups and stuff. And we're like, hell no, we're using these for jiu-jitsu.
It's workout equipment. It'll help.
It totally was. So my friend and three of the other SEAL guys were walking through Singapore in a rainstorm carrying these puzzle mats on their heads, right? I had to hear about that story, that I wasn't there to help because I was stuck on the ship. So for that rest of that deployment, we trained every day, hours and hours and hours and hours a day, that if I wasn't working or on watch, I would be training, because that's all they had to do. They didn't have to do. What are you going to do? Okay, they're going to lift. Okay, then they're going to do some jiu-jitsu. Then maybe they're going to clean guns and shoot later. I was like, oh, fix this, fix that. Have to go over here. Have to stand watch. Have to wake up. And then my friend would rip my curtains open at 4 o'clock in the morning and be like, dude, get up. What are you doing? Let's go work out. And I got to put in a full day. You know what I mean? And it worked out. You know what I mean? It was a strange situation that catapulted my training as a whole. And it really shaped the style of jiu-jitsu that I currently use, the way that I train, the way that I teach, and the way that I share information. We train like crazy people, and we were trying to let's see if it works. And let me see if I can still punch you in the face when that happens.
Right.
And it has positives, and it also has some limitations, because you do get punched in the face sometimes. And the thing does go crunch a little bit sometimes. And then you're like, oh shit, I think this time I'm really hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's it was interesting because it helped me for MMA. It helped me for MMA because my friends at the time were really focused on hurting the other person if they were on top. So it helped me to like learn to position my face, learn to hold the head and arms and the triceps and the elbows in certain ways to maintain a safe position, to also be mindful of the person trying to smash you in their head with their head and things like that that really make a significant difference, even to the point that you don't see them in current MMA because there are rules against them.
Right.
And I'm not going to say that like we train no rules in combat and reality. Look, all we did was try to really jack each other up and see if the stuff really worked. And we
Yeah.
came up with a bunch of ways to try to test it. And some of the stuff is helpful, and some of the stuff, it's less than helpful, and you go crunch. so, that really shaped me. Having all that time bunched into a short chronological time was also very unique.
Yeah.
Because when else in your life do you have so much, say, quote unquote, free time, right? That all you do all day, every day is work out. You know what I
Right.
mean? Are you a trust fund baby? Are you homeless? You know what I mean? Are you in prison? Like,
Right.
what is the, when does that shit happen? And it was really unique to get the advantage of that. So in 95, I got out. As I had said, my martial arts school dissolved that I was training at, and a few different offshoot places went, and I went to one of them, and I started teaching and introducing them to Jiu Jitsu. In
Okay.
95, I started teaching no-gi Jiu Jitsu. I didn't even call it Jiu Jitsu. I just called it grappling. I didn't even call it submission grappling. It was just grappling.
Okay.
Grappling with strikes, grappling without strikes. Sometimes I would tell people, look, I want to take strikes and just put it on the shelf for a few minutes just so I can talk about and demonstrate what we're doing. Because the moment you start showing sometimes some people, the instant like crackhead addiction comes to them and they're like, what if I do this? How about if I do that? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, just hold on. Just a second.
Slow down, Turbo.
just let me just talk about this for a moment, right?
Right.
And just get the idea of what we're supposed to do. That's all. So I start teaching, and it was kind of interesting to run classes. And one of the things I did at the end of my term in the Navy is, on that deployment, me and my friend, we would talk about opening up a martial arts school someday. Like, what would you do? And just like the idea, oh shoot, we need to have this done and that done, and there has to be cleaning products, and what I mean? Just we're like, I tell people that being on that kind of weird deployment is like the only honorable way to really spend time in prison, because
Yeah.
we couldn't go for a walk. You can't go make a sandwich. You can't make a phone call. You know what I mean? Like, you're in the middle of the ocean. You're in prison,
Yeah.
right? You're out
Yeah.
there. That's it. So there we are on the yard, right? Walking around the flight deck. You know what I mean? And then there we are training in the weight room, or, in the gym area, or the well deck where we have the mats, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And that's their existence and mine. So we would plan, hey, what about this? What about that? So I get out. This guy that I know opens up this gym. It's one of the offshoots of the places that I went. A bunch of the instructors migrated over. It was close to my house. My dad also went there, as well as trained at that, one school in the area. And I just continued to now meet people and meet students and develop my own proficiency at jiu-jitsu, while I maintained I don't know, monthly at minimum, but every few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I would train and spend a lot of time with Roy Harris.
Okay.
So I would go back and forth from LA to San Diego, and he would come back and forth from San Diego to LA and teach at my school. I started hosting no-gi tournaments in 1997, 1998. Inter-school tournaments, right? There's tournaments of the jiu-jitsu people in the area, right? In the San Fernando Valley, when I started teaching jiu-jitsu, there was myself, D'Artagnan, the Machado brothers, and Gokor. Those are the only people that taught jiu-jitsu in a 20-mile radius.
Wow. Very, very
If so.
far. Yeah. Very far few in between.
Right. That was it. That was it. No one else taught jiu-jitsu. Now there's probably, I don't know, 100 schools or more in the
Yeah.
valley,
Yeah.
at least in that same area. And it's funny because probably none of them ever even heard of me. But we were the ones having these no-gi tournaments. So I had a few students that had trained maybe 6 months at this time. I'd been teaching now, fast forward to, let's say, 98, 97, 98. And schools are having visitors. People don't want you to teach jujitsu. People don't want you to call it jujitsu. You know, some jujitsu schools would send people out to see if the person teaching any there was any good. That dojo storming, that's real. That's real. That happened. You know, it wouldn't necessarily have like some crazy takeover, but every now and then some dude would roll up.
Right.
It's just what happened. You know, they weren't always nice to me at other places. It was an interesting experience. So I maintained my relationship with Roy and trained with him up through black belt. I trained throughout the time with Roy, periodically with Master Joe. And I trained with Master Joe, and he was the one that taught Roy and really shared a lot of the concepts and the principles and the game and the specific techniques with Roy. And around 2009, I started training with Master Joe because of distance and just a number of availability reasons with my career and with them. And I've been training pretty much ever since, just with Master Joe.
Nice.
And other people. I have other, friends around other different organizations that, after doing this for so long, this is my 29th year as of last September.
Okay.
So I meet a lot of people. I make friends with a lot of people all over town. And I could say that that's also the coolest part. There's like 3 cool things about being a black belt. Okay. Usually at most places, they're inviting, especially when you tell them your history and how long you've been doing it.
Yeah.
It's usually an open door to train.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's fun. That's cool. It's cool to meet people. I don't really subscribe to the whole competition jiu-jitsu thing because it like factionalizes everything, and then just simply for doing it, they don't seem to like you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, I do jiu-jitsu too. Why can't it just be cool? You know what I mean? Like,
right. Like we share the same we share a common ground. Like, why can't we just, be peaceful about this?
Right. Or be fun. Like, it's not fun. Like
what's up?
And you gotta not like them or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because somebody beats somebody and somebody's something, or but I don't know, dude. Like, I've been doing this a long ass time, and it's really irrelevant.
Right.
So that's the first cool thing. All right. The second cool thing is that I don't have to train with the dirty gi guy. I don't have to train with the dirty gi guy. I'm a black belt. I've been doing this 29 years. I don't need to train with you. I'm good. You can train with them. That's cool. Dirty gi guy, I don't train with. So all dirty gi guys in the world, beware. You're not gonna get to roll with me. All right. And then the last final thing is that the chances of me getting kicked in the head when I'm rolling because some other reckless people are nearby, lower, because I can say, hey, you two, go that way, move over.
Yeah.
That's the coolest part about being a black belt.
It's just that position of power. That's all that is.
You guys, go over there more.
Right. You go.
So that's it. Very few times do I, you know what I mean, give Matt space to be like, hey, you guys are crazy and I almost got kicked in the face. You can train over there.
It's funny because I just got my brown belt in beginning.
Congratulations!
Thank you. But one thing in particular, like the guys at the gym, we're all close and everything, so we'll be working and rolling, and we'll get close and be like, hey, move over there. And be like, man, what? I'm like, I'm pulling rank. Go over there. Move over there. It's funny, but it's so fun to do. But it's like, it's all in good fun.
Right.
But so I'll just make sure I understand you. So you got your black belt from Master Joe, or did you get it from Roy?
It's just interesting. And kind of cool.
Okay.
October 13, 2007. I got a black belt from Roy Harris.
Okay.
And after that, Master Joe gave me a black belt.
Mm.
And he continues to give me stripes. But also, what is very cool is that Grandmaster Mansour also recognizes me and has given me a black belt certificate.
Nice. That's just like my instructor, Zachary Holston.
Yeah.
Same thing, with,
Yeah.
Master Joe and Grandmaster Mansour. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, going back to, Master Joe Moera. Wonderful
Yes.
guy, got to work with him, when he came to do seminars and everything else like that. But what was it like meeting him for the first time?
It was interesting because it was so long ago, but it was interesting because we heard so much about him from Roy, and heard about like the way he moves and the way he taught, and it was something that really brought home the concept of like it's about body positioning. It's not about putting the guy into something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really understand how to position your body, then the person won't be able to put you into something.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal. So having him really break down that aspect of it and share those parts of it, not just some move, not just some lock, not just some new twisting, flipping ridiculousness, but to really understand that this man knows how the body works, how motion works, how placement works, how sequence works. It was able to transfer those specific things to my mindset, and that was huge.
Right. Yeah. So when I first met him, this was when my instructor was when my instructor was getting his black belt. So I was still a white belt at the time. I think maybe like one or two stripes, I think. And we were talking about it, and he's like, yeah, my instructor's coming, my black belt test, yada yada yada. And he says, let me tell you something about Joe. So he's going over a little quick brief history. He's like, he came from over, he came here, he taught himself English and all this, other stuff. So he's like, he talks like that too. So I'm like, all right, cool. So the day comes, I meet him, thick accent, very, low, like that low, strong voice, Joe Morero, Jiu Jitsu. And what's so crazy is no matter the fact that you can he taught himself English, but you understand everything he's saying.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because I was told that hey, this is this and that, and then this as time goes on, we get new students in, and our Zach will be like, hey, we got Master Joe coming, blah blah blah. So people who do know or don't know be like, oh, that's cool, yada yada yada. And then we break it down to him too. They was like, oh, what is it like meeting Master Joe? I was like, listen, all you need to do is just listen carefully. I was like, he taught himself English, but he's an amazing guy, and you will understand everything he said. And,
yeah.
And that's the best way I can explain it. But it's you. And when it comes to him and the system that we follow under him, it's so amazing. Even today, it's like he's still breaking down the simplest techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, we've been doing these snakes, following these rules and principles since we started jiu-jitsu, we started our training to now, and it's still something new, or we like a small tiny detail that we've missed for so long.
Deep.
And it's like, what? Even as a brown belt, watching his videos that he posts on social media, and it's like, what is this? Or my instructor sent us something like, look at this, look what Joe sent, or look what Joe just was going over, and someone noticed, and blah blah blah. And we're like, that's amazing. That is crazy.
Absolutely. The knowledge and the understanding is incredibly deep.
Yeah.
Incredibly deep.
Yeah.
There's a few things I crack up because I cringe in a way when I know that there's a lot of people that have never trained with him before in a room that he's teaching at, because more than anything, they don't speak Joe.
Yeah.
You have to speak Joe.
You have to speak Joe.
You have to speak Joe. And I said that they're not going to be able to get as much of the awesomeness out of it as I hope they can. So sometimes I jump in and I say, here's what, you know what I mean, he just said. And they're like, oh,
yeah.
But you have to speak Joe, because there's some English words he uses and there's some Portuguese words he uses that he adds into the same sentence.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes he repeats the word or says something. And I know certain words also mean certain things that Joe says. So I know exactly what he's talking about. I speak Joe.
Like, yeah, you have to speak Joe. And
yes.
I have a couple other Moira affiliates that come up in the podcast. And I'm gonna ask them how long did it take you to learn how to speak Joe?
Yes. Speak Joe.
How long did it take you to learn how to speak Joe? But yeah, man, it's funny because we tell people this is how you talk, but just listen. Just pay attention, focus, and listen.
That's true. It really, if you do, you can understand. And even though, if you only listen, you can skip over the words that you don't understand and put the pieces together. But see, I know more of Joe's specific language words, so it's easier for me to put those together. I put them together. I still have to calculate them.
Yeah.
I'm not lying to you. You know what I mean? I still have to calculate them, but I know exactly and more of what he's saying. And then I understand him. I have an ear for him. And I know also the jiu-jitsu situation.
Right.
So it adds extra.
Right. And, I was benefit, I had the privilege of, being there when my instructor got his black belt, early in my jiu-jitsu journey. So we got a chance to sit down and talk and just vibe out with him. And so I got a chance to really hear him talk. And then he came back, I think was a blue belt this time, and he was with Grandmaster Mansour, which was another mind-blowing experience meeting Grandmaster, because our instructor was telling us about it. It's like, yeah, we're going to bring out Grandmaster, we're going to bring out Master Joe, blah blah blah. And you see Grandmaster Mansour, he was in sweats, a varsity hoodie, and I mean not a hoodie, like a sweater and some sweats, hunched over, walking slow. And we meet, and then Zach introduced us and everything. He's like, oh, you can go in my office and change. And it's when he put on that gi and he tied that belt, he was a totally different person. a totally different person. And I'm, he's going over, his seminar, and I'm just in shock and awe that the guy of this age was moving like this, for one. Because I'm like, this is unbelievable to me. You don't see this often. And there was one point where he was going over a knee bar from guard. And he was like, he don't know nobody's name, so he's calling belt ranks. Blue belt, come here. And you just jump up and run over there. So, I get up, and, he's in my guard. He's explaining. And I'm just soaking in the knowledge. I'm soaking it in, because it's I'm still starstruck that, how is this old guy doing this? So he, he's going over the technique. He leans in, hops up to his knees, fall back to the leg lock, right? Keep in mind, I'm the uke.
Yeah.
And, people who don't know what an uke is, that's the person who's demonstrating with the person who's, showing the technique. He falls back into this leg lock. And I'm like, oh, that was so crazy. Wait, why is my knee burning? Oh, snap. And so,
wait, why is my knee burning?
I was like, wait, why is my knee burning? I was like, oh, snap. I'm in the technique, so I'm tapping. It wasn't like he had it locked in, tight, but it was just like, oh, wait. Let me let this go. And I still have knee problems a little bit to this day, but
you were so mesmerized at watching what was happening.
And I wear it as a badge of honor. I didn't even realize what happened. I'm just starstruck that this dude, this old guy, just hops up to his feet with ease, falls back, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Wait a minute, but
he to speak on that, he holds he holds the title for me. I've seen a lot of things, right? I've been training for 48 years
Wow.
actively. Okay. And
Yeah.
he holds the title of the coolest martial arts thing I've ever seen.
I believe it. I believe
Okay.
it.
The second coolest martial arts thing I've ever seen was videotaped that my friend Burton Richardson showed me of Tatang Illustrissimo doing sticks in the Philippines. And he was doing a sword like lesson with him and a stick lesson with him that he had videotaped. And to watch that guy move was just amazing. And it was probably something that we won't see much of because they were all super secretive back there. And Burton just showed me on his laptop. I've never seen him post a video or anything like that. And they get all really weird about permission and things like that. So anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know how much that'll ever be seen, but something similar is anything that you look up Tatang Illustrissimo working. There's videos on YouTube. It was amazing, the video that I saw. Okay. Now, flash forward, it was like the first or second time that Grandmaster Mansour had been up here in Orange County. And I watched him lay on his side and he said something and he talked about the story of the Sidewinder snake.
Sidewinder snake.
And when he did Sidewinder snake, I'm not kidding you. And I wasn't videotaping. And that's like one of my third biggest regrets in my whole life, right? Is that I wasn't videoing that time with my phone. And I often do. So I watched him travel probably about 10 or 12 feet, like in the blink of an eye.
Yes.
Amazingly coordinated, perfectly smooth. And I went, oh my God, that would be impossible to hold on to him. At that moment, in that time, in that circumstance, I literally was like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That right there.
And there was one point in the seminar he was talking about like grips and everything else. So he's sitting on the mats. He has his hands in the the C grip.
Yeah.
And we had like 6 guys, not small guys. Grab each 3 guys on each arm and they're pulling. And he's sitting there. He's like, "Come on," he's like, "Pull," and they're pulling. And I'm looking like, okay, they're not actually pulling his arms, like they can't be. I'm looking over, the guy is sweating at this point, like trying to break. They're pulling so hard to break his grip, but they couldn't. And I'm just like, that moment, I was like, I hope and pray that I'm able to get to that level of like jujitsu at that age where it's like you're still doing stuff that people have, or half your age or even more can't even fathom doing.
Right.
But you're up here and I can't remember how old he is now, but just at that point it was like, man, that's so amazing.
Yeah, he's in his 80s for sure.
Yeah, and it's like, and you're moving like you're 20.
Yeah.
And the joy and excitement from his face.
Yeah.
When he talks about it. And it's like, man, I hope I never lose that spark when it comes to jiu-jitsu and, further along in my journey, Lord forbid, Lord grant I make it to those 70s and 80s and someone say, XYZ jiu-jitsu, and my face like, oh yeah, we can talk about this all day. Let's go.
Yeah.
So,
to definitely speak on that, Grandmaster Mansour in general, one of the things that he talks about, and I try to also advocate for this. He says, I get stronger at jiu-jitsu doing jiu-jitsu. I do jiu-jitsu exercises to get stronger at doing jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
That's key. And he pops up, it's because he practices that shit. It matters. He does. What are you doing? Why are you jumping jacks? You trained to fly? No. Get on the ground and move some snakes around.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that the snake movements are basically footwork for the ground. They don't look at it like that.
Nope.
And that kind of is something that I was touching on in my class this last Wednesday, that I tell people, you watch the Tom and Jerry cartoons, right? and then there's like a dead guy, and he has a little chalk line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outlines the body. And I tell people that you're dead if you stay inside the chalk line. So you got to move, not just move wildly, not just move randomly, but you've got to get out of the chalk line. Whether
Right.
it's directing your opponent's weight to the side, whether it's just moving out from underneath them, whether it's positioning yourself so you can get into a position to make a fight. That's what makes the biggest difference. And if you are training to where you're all bunched up, you don't necessarily also take the liberty of making either distance or placement difference with you and your opponent.
Right.
So it's key to not let that go, and key to not train in an overcrowded place, and key to have those mindsets of moving yourself out from under him through placement, and see how much that changes the situation of whatever's going on, especially from being on the bottom.
Yeah. And that's something that we try to get through to our students that we have come in, like white belts, and me being an assistant instructor, it's been drilled in my head. So it's like, they was like, oh man, I get stuck in this position, or how am I able to do this, or I want to learn how to do this. And we the thing we always go back to is you have to follow your principles. You have to learn how to snake. You're like, hey man, can you teach me how to do an XYZ, or can you teach me this? You have to learn how to move first.
You gotta learn how to move first.
You have to learn how to move first. You have to understand how your body works. You have to, you have to think of this as a new language, because you're not used to moving on the ground.
Yes.
When was the last time you like got down on the ground and just crawled?
Right.
Or army crawled, or or scooted.
Yes.
You haven't. You get up, you walk, and you sit down. Yeah,
exactly.
We what we do, we crawl, we roll, we twist, we turn, we move.
Yes.
We move so crazily. When people come in and see it, it's like, man, I can't do that. Like, well, yeah, at one point I couldn't either, but I was like, I didn't just wake up and learn how to shift my shoulders like this and be able to walk across the mat, or be able to move my hands and feet a certain way at the same time to reestablish guard or whatever. Like, this stuff takes time and it takes practice.
Yes.
But yeah, you have to learn your basics, and like you said, get out of that chalk line. Get your guard, get your opponent off center. You gotta follow your rules. You gotta use your snakes. No matter what technique we go over, those main principles still apply.
Yes.
So, like, I can teach you how to do an elbow knee escape, but if you're flat on your back, you can't do it.
Right.
So
everything's gonna be harder.
Yeah, everything's gonna be hard. Like, at that point, you're fighting gravity. You're fighting your opponent's weight. You don't want to do all that. So,
exactly.
I like my instructor. He he drills that in my head, and he says a lot. He's like, I'm old. I ain't got time for doing all that movement. I'm gonna move. We're gonna do this, do that, move, learn how to do this, and your jiu-jitsu is gonna work. But definitely. But yeah. So that's pretty much our hour, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, myself too. It's good to hear you guys doing the same principles. I said that Master Joe makes clones.
Yeah. Oh man. Yes.
Oh, here's one thing I want you to take away from this.
Oh yeah, I would say if there's anything else you want to add, or you want to promote, or shout out, plug, is by all means, the floor is still yours.
Check this out.
Yes.
You said something that I actually changed people's perspective with.
Okay.
You said that you have to learn the basics, right? And I don't use the term basic. Now here's why. I don't use the term basic because the newer people, they always will feel that there's a time that they will be able to surpass that. So what I tell them is, this is fundamental. You're going to build on it from white to black belt. It's always going to work. It's always going to be effective. And it's only going to get better. But when they have a mindset of like, oh, well, it's basic. Well, I should be doing some advanced stuff by now. They're like, that's why you can do those other things and have more coordination and have more sequence movements and have more controlled action, because you understand these fundamental things. That's it.
Oh, well, I'll definitely take that into consideration. I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
But yeah, I teach Wednesday nights. I'm going to add a Sunday night, at this small Aikido school in Northridge.
Mm-hmm.
I travel around. I teach seminars all over. Occasionally I'm in Battle Creek or Detroit, once a year. I travel down to Key West and do some seminars down there. So it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, we're in Oak Park, Michigan. So when you're in that area, yeah, we would definitely love to have you come by the school.
That's awesome.
All right, so that's the end of today's episode. I would like to thank our guest again, Louie, for coming and sharing such amazing stories with us today. So if you enjoyed the show, please go follow the Facebook and Instagram page so you can stay up to date on our future episodes. This has been Talk Your Jits podcast. Keep rolling, keep grinding, and remember, long live Jitsu. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you. And little by little, I'm going to gain some interest and just have people. It's more just for me because it's something that I enjoy,
Oh, so you
take my kids to.
you just opened your school?
This one, yeah. This one. I've taught at many places for a long, long time, but this is still new. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Like I said, I rent a space. I just rent the space from this lady that, owns this Aikido dojo. And she has some other things that go on there, and all of those have a, open time frame. So I just take advantage of that in the space. It's really nice. It's where you saw the last video. It's where I've been shooting my videos from.
Yeah, I've been watching those a lot. I've been watching those a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I, try to do some fundamental stuff. I'm going to, really kind of break down and break into the mount escapes, what really matters with the mount escape.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things that I tell people that they don't realize before that is that your arm position dictates, to me, being smaller, what type of escape you're going to use on your opponent. Your opponent's arm position. It's not, I see people around purple belt, brown, blue belt. They say, I have my go-to escape. This is my go-to escape. And that's instantly when I know that they don't understand. They're just proficient at a few things and they're going to try the one they're best at.
Right. Mm-hmm. But that's cool. That is very cool.
All right. It was great talking to you. And anytime that you want to have me back, feel free.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. This won't be the last time. I'm hoping to get at least majority of the people who I interviewed to come back on later episodes. But yeah, definitely.
Awesome. All right. Well, you have a good day and stay in touch.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Bye.
Bye.